What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, March 21st, 2018, and middle of the week hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, his hand hovering over that telephone, ready to swoop on down and grab it and put you on the air with your comments and questions. So let's just get on into it here. The good news today is the Austin serial bomber has been stopped. Apparently, he was stopped, amazingly enough, in Round Rock, Texas, apparently very close to the studios for Republic Broadcasting. And he was in a car, and apparently he had one of his bombs with him. And when the SWAT team moved in on him, he detonated the bomb, killing himself, wounding one of the SWAT people. And apparently he was 24 years old, Mark Anthony Condit, and apparently was unemployed. For some reason, the media is really pushing the fact that he's Christian and he's homeschooled. But apparently he has no prior criminal record whatsoever. And so the first question I have is, was this guy on prescription antidepressants? And apparently he was sharing a house in Pflugerville with two roommates. The house is described as kind of rundown, a lot of weird people going in and out at all hours. But apparently he'd been staying at a hotel in Round Rock, and they were able to track this guy down because of closed-circuit TV pictures at the Austin FedEx facility where he dropped off two packages. Now, even though he is dead, Austin police are warning people to be very careful because there's a 24-hour period where they didn't know where he was and what he was doing, so they could still be other unexploded bombs out there. So exercise all appropriate caution. And I'm glad they got the guy. And I'd like to know, was he on prescription antidepressants? But there's an interesting little article that came out in 12160.info commenting on how the Austin bombing suspect, Mark Anthony Condit's social media has all been scrubbed now. And that's usually an indication that something may not be on the up and up, but apparently was just completely erased here. Now, on March 12th, this last March 12th, in a town hall meeting in Huntington, New York, Democratic Congressman Tom Suozzi, who represents Long Island, appeared to be urging an armed insurrection against President Trump. Now, there was a report in the New York Post basically quoting him as saying, it's really a matter of putting public pressure on the president. This is where the Second Amendment comes in, quite frankly, because, you know, what if the president was to ignore the courts? What would you do? What would we do? And apparently somebody in his Democratic audience asked, what's the Second Amendment? But to me, this sounds like a violation of Title 18 U.S. Code Section 2382. Now, isn't it amazing how Democrats can be totally anti-gun, and then when it comes to getting President Trump, oh, yes, we support the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. This guy needs to be talked to at least by the Secret Service. Well, apparently the Me Tooers are still after Donald Trump, and apparently a woman who appeared on his former reality TV show has sued him for defamation. She accused him of sexually harassing her after she appeared on his show, and apparently Trump's saying, no, he didn't actually do it, is seen as defamation in her mind. And, of course, we still have the Stormy Daniels case that's on out there. And, again, it's possible to fool a polygraph. Judges can allow them as evidence in a courtroom trial, but judges can also say, no, they're not reliable enough. And let's be honest, we're dealing with a woman whose career was faking orgasms. So I think that gives her the ability to fool the polygraph here. Now, a new piece of email has surfaced proving that Huma Abedin shared marked, sensitive but unclassified information with the Clinton Global Initiative, part of the Clinton Foundation. This is a violation of State Department rules. And again, it shows that Hillary and her people were basically using the State Department to boost the Clinton Foundation. And I'm wondering, when are we going to see an arrest in this case? The pay for play has been documented. The fact that it's not qualified to be a 501c3 or wasn't qualified to be a 501c3 has been documented. Why is nothing being done? It's like all of establishment Washington is just out to get Trump because he doesn't fit in. He's not going to go along with the cover-ups. He's not going to go along with the corruption. And they're just desperate to get him out. And at the same time, they're just handing Hillary Clinton a get-out-of-jail-free card, like James Comey did. James Comey went down the laundry list of Title 18 felony violations committed by Hillary Clinton and then said, we're not going to prosecute because she didn't mean to do wrong. But if you've read Title 18, intent is not required. Negligence, carelessness in allowing classified information to pass into an unsecure environment or an unsecured computer, that's the violation right there. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, apparently the head of the House Judiciary Committee is preparing to subpoena the Department of Justice. Could even happen in the next couple of days, to obtain all documents related to how the FBI handled its investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server. This is reported from The Hill. And Representative Bob Goodlatte, the House Oversight Committee Reform Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy, have been leading this joint probe into what the two lawmakers say may be evidence of political bias in the highest levels of the Justice Department. Gee, you think? Of course there was bias in the FBI and the Department of Justice. There's no question. But the American people have a right to know if, in point of fact, a serving Secretary of State was running an espionage operation, selling sensitive U.S. government secrets to foreign interests using her email server with weaker security than Ashley Madison, and using that Clinton Foundation to collect and launder the payments. Because remember, something like 40% of the money going into the foundation came from foreign sources. That includes all the money that came from the Russian investors into the Uranium One deal that Hillary greased the skids for. Now, over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton is saying, we're not done with McCabe. The scandal is not over. The FBI and Department of Justice cover-ups continue on both the Clinton emails and anti-Trump texts. It's time to clean house at both of those. The top layers of the FBI and the top layers of the Department of Justice have to be shaved off right now. And we're still hearing rumors that Trump may fire Jeff Sessions and replace him with Trey Gowdy, at which point Trey Gowdy could fire Robert Mueller. Now, down at Freedom Watch, Larry Klayman is trying to mount a petition drive saying that he should be the next Attorney General. And I wouldn't have a problem with that. I'm very familiar with Klayman's work over the years. I became friends with one of his lawyers when he was still at Judicial Watch all the way back during the Vince Foster case. And I followed Larry Klayman. He is unbiased. He goes after corruption in both parties with equal relish. We need a man like him somewhere. Special counsel, attorney general, we need him inside to fight the swamp. Again, at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton is saying, frankly, I'm tired of the Republicans almost in a knee-jerk reaction defending everything that Mueller is doing. He needs accountability and oversight the way every other government bureaucrat does. Yes, that's absolutely true. Now, yesterday we were talking about how Robert Mueller had basically led the investigation into the anthrax letters that were sent out right after 9/11, and he ignored this scientist who was actually caught on the security system going into the lab where the anthrax was kept, and instead he went after this Stephen Hatfield and Bruce Ivins, ruined their lives, absolutely destroyed their lives and their career. In fact, Bruce Ivins committed suicide, at which point the FBI said, oh, well, we can blame this guy. He's not going to fight back. He's not going to be out there saying, I'm innocent. Case closed. Now remember that anthrax was mailed in envelopes that were written to look like they were sent by semi-literate Arab Muslims. But a genetic test of the anthrax inside proved it came from a U.S. government biological weapons laboratory, which we're not supposed to have, but we do. Now, to bring you up to date, you have to remember that Robert Mueller also lied about Iraq's non-existent nuclear weapons. He was part of that propaganda campaign to scare us into going to war against Iraq, which had not actually done anything to us except want to sell its oil for the euro instead of the dollar. This guy is a crook. And I don't care how long he was head of the FBI. We know the FBI is a crooked organization. Go back and reread the history of COINTELPRO. That's what the FBI is really like. They're not the nice bunch of crime solvers you see on TV shows and movies. That's all propaganda. J. Edgar Hoover was just an absolute nut that Hollywood portrayed the FBI a certain way. There was even a movie called The FBI Story, and it starred Jimmy Stewart. And Hoover was actually on the soundstage every day of the shooting, telling the director how to make the movie. There's actually, I don't know if it's still there, probably still there, but in Hoover's time, there was a department at the FBI that did nothing but obtain pre-production copies of screenplays and go through them and make sure if there was a mention of the FBI, that it was a positive one. In fact, if you go to my COINTELPRO page, there's a sub-chapter, the FBI in Hollywood, where it goes into detail about some of the things the FBI did to basically say, you got to take this scene out. You're making fun of the FBI. That can't be allowed. Which is censorship, violation of the First Amendment. Now, there's another article over at the original antiwar.com, and it's saying something that I've seen in a lot of different places. We even mentioned it on the show earlier. And it's Pompeo and Haspel are symptoms of a deeper problem. And basically what the article is saying, these nominations are symptoms of a problem. Before being chosen by Trump to head up the CIA, Mike Pompeo was one of the most pro-war members of Congress. He's constantly hostile toward Iran, and many times he's erroneously claimed that Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. The reality is Iran does not attack and does not threaten the United States. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest in over 200 years. That's not their nature. But apparently Trump, and this is something I firmly disagree with him on, Trump believes that enhanced interrogation, which is polite speech for torture, can actually work. And experts in the field of interrogation say, no, it doesn't. It absolutely does not work. What you get is the victim of the torture screaming out whatever he thinks the torturer wants to hear to stop the pain. All torture is good for is getting politically expedient confessions. And that's what it's been used for, from the Inquisition to the Nazis, to the Americans in Vietnam, to the Americans today or recently in Iraq. Little story, little historical story. During World War II, in Germany, there was an interrogator who was very successful at getting information out of captured pilots. And he didn't use torture. All he did was he made friends with them. He got, he would actually take them out of the POW camp, take them into town, feed them a decent meal, share a few drinks with them, and just become friends. And the pilots would start talking. And as a matter of fact, after the war was over, this interrogator was brought to the United States under Operation Paperclip to find out just how he had done all of this and why we forgot that ancient wisdom is a mystery to me. Unless we have leaders who just out of part of their sociopathy just like to think, yes, we're going to do torture, we're going to cause pain, it's fun, it's cool, let's waterboard some more people. Or they get the politically expedient confessions. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, they waterboarded him something like 160 times to get him to confess to being the mastermind of 9/11. They also locked his kids in these dark metal boxes with biting insects and made Khalid Sheikh Mohammed listen to their screams. Nice people, the U.S. government. Now, there's a new GOP up-and-comer, Erica Harold. She's a graduate of Harvard. She's a former Miss America. She's from a biracial family. And apparently she just won the Republican nomination for Illinois Attorney General last night. And so it looks like there's a new rising GOP star that we can all start to take a look at. Once again, Russia is out there saying that U.S. is planning a terrorist false flag chemical attack in Syria to justify an attack on Damascus. Russia says it will respond. Russia is sending a clear, unambiguous signal. There are Russian nationals at various military posts all around Damascus. And Russia is saying if they are harmed, if they are threatened, Russia will basically go after the missiles themselves and the launching platforms. Now, that could mean Russia going after another Aegis ship in the Mediterranean, because that's what Donald Trump used to attack that Syrian airfield. And we know that Russia's defenses against the Aegis ships are quite effective because of what happened in the Black Sea between a Russian electronic warfare craft and the USS Donald Cook. They shut that ship down. The crew came out of that experience traumatized, just absolutely demoralized that they couldn't do anything. The plane just came in on a simulated attack run and everything on the ship just went crazy. Now, apparently, as the U.S.-backed terrorists continue to flee, the Syrian government forces are finding more and more chemical weapons. And according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, basically so far they have found 40 tons of chemical weapons and their precursors left by the militants. So, yeah, it's been these U.S.-backed militants, terrorists, carrying out these chemical attacks and trying to frame Assad for it. But Assad gave up all his chemical weapons. It was a deal brokered by Russia. It was supervised by international inspectors. Assad doesn't have this stuff. Of course, the pro-war propagandists are saying, well, obviously he hid some. He didn't give them all up. He's got to have chemical weapons. He's using them on his own people. Okay, why? That's where the story falls apart. Assad does not have a motive at this time to use chemical weapons. He's all but won the war. And he knows that any kind of a weapon of mass destruction will justify an American attack. He doesn't need that. He doesn't have a motive. The only one who gains from a chemical weapon attack in Syria blamed on Assad is the United States war hawks. Because right now, the American people are tired of all these wars. The U.S. is facing global condemnation for being inside Syria without the permission of Syria's legitimate government. Syria wants them gone. Russia wants them gone. America needs to craft some kind of a political weapon that will allow them to say, see, we were right all along. Assad is doing this. The attack is on. Now, we're going to take a break for some commercials. When we come on back, latest developments from Syria and the other wars around the world. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And once again, if you are able to help in even the tiniest way, Republic Broadcasting needs you. The postal address to send a check or money order, or if you prefer anonymity, even cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. Or if you want to become a recurring subscriber, the phone number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. Folks, we really need it. We're not kidding about it. Republic Broadcasting is right on the edge, and we need your help to survive. So the network thanks you. I thank you. All donations welcome and needed and appreciated. Absolutely. Speaking of Round Rock, which has unfortunately been put onto the map because of the Austin bomber, latest update on that story is the two roommates of the bomber have now been detained for questioning. They're not arrested, but they've been detained for questioning as to what they knew. And if they knew something was going on and failed to report it, they could be in serious trouble. Apparently, bomb detection dogs have been brought to Condit's home, and police are planning to evacuate several blocks around the house before they start digging to see what's in there. I mean, obviously, this Condit planned this for a long time in advance. After that first bombing, it's not like you could go on into a chemical store and say, I need things that go bang. I'm curious as to what filler he actually used. Obviously, the easiest one to fabricate on your own is AMFO, but these were fairly small packages. And the police did say there was some kind of a unique fingerprint to the filler, which is how they knew all the bombs came from the same source, except the last one, which was the incendiary device. That one appears to have been a copycat crime, and I hope they catch that guy as well. Okay, let's go to the phones here. Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. I have a few things on my mind today. The first thing that I wanted to address with you is this thing with Seth Rich, this investigator being killed, or not killed. He was wounded. I don't think he's dead. But to me, this adds more fire that Seth Rich was definitely the leaker to Julian Assange.
I agree. I agree. This ex-Marine apparently shot him and then ran over him. So this investigator / lobbyist has been injured, but he did survive. And I imagine he's probably mad as a hornet right about now.
Yeah, I mean, what a tough dude. The second thing I wanted to get at with you was yesterday, of course, you addressed the shooting that was maybe, 70 miles from my house, 80 miles maybe, the shooting in Maryland.
Yes.
I heard you say yesterday the timing. I have a few other questions. With Parkland, the police not doing their job, and then this time the police being for the resource officer being there. I also want to say the police...
Excuse me. Can you talk a little closer to your telephone mouthpiece because you're breaking up and it's very hard to understand you?
Is that any better?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay. The shooting that was yesterday, that is pretty close to my house, about maybe 80 miles from my house. I heard you say the timing yesterday, and one of my big questions that I have is the Parkland, the police officer, school resource officer, the stand down and everything like this, could this or was this the event that the police needed to make them look good in the eyes of the people?
Well, my conclusion is that this incident in Maryland is the real deal. Apparently, the shooter had a relationship with the female student, and apparently she dumped him and had become friends with this other male student. And this kid snapped. And again, I want to know if he was on prescription antidepressants.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And then the third and final thing, I ran across, and this is one of these bizarre articles. I ran across an article, KDKA, CBS affiliate out of Pittsburgh, PA, ran an article about MIT. If you go to MIT and give them $10,000, they will then kill you and upload your consciousness to a computer. Again, this goes along. Yeah, I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to give $10,000 to anybody to kill me. I like being alive. I don't have $10,000 because I just bought a car. But we don't even know how the brain works. And the idea that somebody could somehow upload it to a computer where it would actually make any sense, I mean, that's right out of, what was that Johnny Depp movie, Transcendence. which is a good movie, and I really like it. It's also right out of the storyline for Brain Scan, which was Natalie Wood's last movie. But I don't think the technology is really there. First of all, why do they have to kill you to upload your consciousness? Can't they just copy off your consciousness and demonstrate that it's actually there inside the machine? So I don't think it's MIT. I think it's a private company that's associated with MIT.
Well, you have a great day. That's all I have for you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take another break for commercials. We've got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to the phones, I do want to get this one story in here. We were talking about all the 40 tons of chemical weapons that have been recovered from the abandoned bases of the U.S.-backed militants. And I wanted to follow it up. There's a Syrian war report. Apparently, there have been 3 chemical weapons attacks that were thwarted by the Syrian forces. So they're out there. They're trying to get these chemical weapon attacks done so they can frame Assad and launch a new escalation into Syria. Let's go back to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing okay.
Yeah, they found, Mike, some of those machines that make these chemicals are made in Canada. So, I wonder how they get over there, huh?
Well,
Amazon phone, maybe?
Yeah, quite possibly. But, you know, I mean, they've shown photographs of some of the chemical containers, and they're made right here in the United States of America.
How do they, where are they learning to make this stuff, too? So there's got to be a handler, obviously. You know, would that be those advisors?
Could be, but apparently there was an instruction manual that apparently was provided by the Saudis.
Same Saudis that Trump was sitting next to the other day with a big cardboard cutout of pictures of different weapons he was selling them. And that was the most bizarre thing, Mike. I've seen a lot of bizarre stuff, but that had to be the most bizarre scene I ever seen. And it looked like Bin Salman looked a little uneasy about that. He was given like a smirk, and I bet you it was a smirk of dissatisfaction, actually.
Could be, or could just be the jet lag.
And then I want to talk about Boris Johnson again, because he just keeps on being the gift that keeps on giving, about how Putin's World Cup is equivalent to Hitler's 1938 Olympics. That's a good way to bring peace.
Yeah,
to the world, isn't it?
You know, I used to have a lot of respect for Boris Johnson, but in the current mode, he's definitely part of the problem. And again, it does look like they're trying to force a confrontation with Russia, and they may get it if the U.S. goes in and attacks Damascus. And even Paul Craig Roberts is saying war is clearly on the horizon here.
He looks like a wreck of a person, though. He just always looks sloppily, and I don't know, man. Anybody? I know the guy who calls from the UK. He's probably going to comment on Boris Johnson, but what a disgrace, man! Like, get rid of them. Him, May, the whole lot, man. Like, what they did to Jeremy Corbyn. Like, I mean, how embarrassing. You know, like, no. You know, you can't be against this. You got to be all for it, or you're the enemy. You know, just like over here. You know, if you speak out against the Iraq War, you're against the troops. You know, tie a yellow ribbon around the tree. You're against the troops. You know, you're unpatriotic. You know, there's the same crap. It's a small playbook, so you know how the playbook works already. Everybody should know how the playbook works by now. You know.
Yeah, it's you're either with us or with them. There's no middle ground. There's no neutrality. Bush said much the same thing. So did Anakin Skywalker just before he becomes Darth Vader. And it is a very absolutist position. But we've been seeing this ramp up for months now. Anybody who's questioning the war agenda, anybody who's questioning the legitimacy of any of this stuff, oh, you must be an arm of Russian propaganda, or you're a Russian stooge. We're right back into McCarthyism here.
Yeah, this is basically fascism. I mean,
yes.
You know, there's no way to not say it is. Like, with that, no, you know, free speech is being taken away. They want to take your guns and the statues and the books and eventually you. It's just crazy. But, all right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And getting on back to the news. Apparently, the Syrian rebels have launched missiles and artillery shells into a shopping district of the government-held Jaramana area, resulting in a massacre of civilians. These are the people the U.S. government are supporting. And they're firing artillery shells and missiles at basically a shopping area. There's no military purpose to the target. It's a campaign of terror. It's exactly what Hitler was doing to London with the V-1 buzz bomb and the V-2 ballistic missile. Now, Turkish President Erdogan today told the U.S. to stop deceiving Turkey and start cooperation after Washington said it was concerned about the Turkish-led offensive on the Syrian city of Afrin. And Erdogan's comments came after the U.S. State Department reacted to the capture by Turkish forces of Afrin from the Kurdish militia by sounding alarm over the fates of civilians and looting. Well, that's a little disingenuous for the State Department to be concerned about civilians when you look at what the U.S. by proxy is doing over in Yemen. But Erdogan came on back and said, if we are strategic partners, you must respect us and you must work with us. Basically what Erdogan is saying, he's expecting the U.S. to cooperate in dealing with the Kurds. And it's going to be a lousy time to be a Kurd because Iraq has now approved Turkish military operations to purge their joint borders. So the dream of an independent Kurdistan is slowly vanishing. But of course, the only reason the U.S. backed an independent Kurdistan was to further balkanize the Middle East, to break chunks off of Iraq and Syria and Turkey and form this independent Kurdistan and make those other nations just a little bit smaller and easier to control. Now, do you remember all the way back when we did that, the invasion of Iraq? Not just a little one over Kuwait, but full on going into Baghdad. And there was a big stink over the fact that U.S. forces surrounded the oil ministry building to protect the records inside, wanted to protect the maps of where the oil was, wanted to protect all that information. But they left the Baghdad Museum totally unguarded. And of course, it was looted and plundered. Now, some of that material's been recovered, but there's a story out here in the Atlantic basically saying the problem persists to this day, that it's disturbingly easy to buy Iraq's archaeological treasures. Now, some 7,000 looted items have been returned to the Baghdad Museum, but about 8,000 are still out there somewhere. Plus, there's the problem that artifacts were taken directly out of the ground at archaeological sites, and their whereabouts are unknown. Now, over in Great Britain, they're still pushing on this Skripal thing. They're still ramping up the rhetoric. Theresa May is warning Putin there is more to come as tensions soar. And Britain is apparently clamping down on private jet passengers flying into the country as part of the response to the Salisbury nerve gas attack on Russian double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia, according to security chiefs. But there are a lot of questions about this whole affair that are not being answered, or the answers are unsatisfactory, conflicting. Why are we not hearing any updates on the conditions of Sergei and Yulia Skripal? Since the first week, we know they were sick, we know they went to the hospital. Are they still alive? If they're alive, what's their current condition? What symptoms are they displaying? Now, in a recent letter to the Times, Stephen Davies, consultant in emergency medicine at Salisbury National Health Service Foundation Trust, wrote the following. Sir, further to your report, poison exposure leaves almost 40 needing treatment. May I clarify that no patients have experienced nerve agent poisoning in Salisbury, and there have only ever been 3 patients with significant poisoning. So that's remarkably odd. You have a guy who's in a position to know saying that whatever poison was used, it wasn't a nerve agent. Now, of course, the official story is that Skripal's and Detective Sergeant Nick Bailey were poisoned by a military-grade nerve agent. And according to some claims, the type referred to could be anywhere between 5 and 8 times more toxic than VX nerve agent. Given that just 10 milligrams of VX is the LD50 dose, it seems likely that the particular type mentioned in the Skripal case should have killed them instantly. So again, it looks like it isn't this nerve agent that's being bandied around in the press. So, and it just goes on and gone and gone and gone. They're pushing military-grade nerve agent, must be Russia, must be Russia. Basically, this is a repeat of Saddam and his nuclear weapons. That's what's going on here. And there are a lot more questions. There's a lot of... This story doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. Jeremy Corbyn is right. There should be a full investigation. In accordance with the Convention on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, there's a protocol already laid out that everybody who signed that treaty agrees to. Britain is not following it. It's a rush to judgment. And already we're seeing the Remainers in Great Britain trying to use this to say, we have to stay close to the European Union for our protection, for our security. Well, I hate to throw a cold blanket on that, or a wet blanket on that, rather, but you're part of the European Union right now. You haven't actually left yet, and being part of the European Union didn't protect Skripal, did it? So that argument is rather moot. They're trying to use it to basically fan the flames of Remain. They want to overturn Brexit here. And so what is going on here is Britain now has its own version of Russiagate. Everything bad that happens, it's Russia. Russia did this, Russia did that. Building falls over, oh, it had to be Russia. Horrible winter weather, Russia's hacking the climate. There are too many people who want this war, and the problem is, when they get it, they're not the ones who pay for it. They're not the ones who fight and die. They're not going to lose their family members in it. It's ordinary people of the United States and of Great Britain who will pay the costs. Now, Russia's foreign ministry is out there saying it's entirely possible Britain may be behind the attack on Skripal's daughter. That either the British authorities are not able to provide protection from such a terrorist attack on their soil, or they orchestrated an attack on a Russian citizen for propaganda purposes. Remember, Great Britain is the nation that gave us the dodgy dossier, which led us into the Iraq War, which, except for guaranteeing that Iraq's oil would be sold for the US dollar, was pretty much an abysmal failure. Now, Sweden has unveiled plans for what they're calling a total societal mobilization against Russia. And basically, it sounds like they're cranking up not only their military, but they're starting their propaganda campaign to get the Swedish people to absolutely hate Russia. Russia's coming to get you. Start stockpiling meatballs right now. You're going to need them. Now, as you know, Donald Trump is a friend of Netanyahu. He's a friend of the Israeli government. And apparently his policies are being reflected by the U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. And apparently Abbas, after their last meeting, has basically called the U.S. ambassador to Israel a son of a dog. And Ambassador Friedman came back saying that Abbas's remarks were anti-Semitic. Well, I don't see how you get from son of a dog to anti-Semitism. If anything, the dog should be upset. But the war of words is escalating. Now, remember the Palestinian teen, Ahed Tamimi? She was arrested because she slapped a soldier that had just shot a member of her family. And her arrest and detention was triggered global outrage and concern. There were rallies. Free Ahed Tamimi. Well, her lawyers have just announced that they've come to a plea bargain where Tamimi will plead guilty for the slap and she'll spend 8 months in jail. I think it's a travesty, but given Israeli justice towards the Palestinians, I think she's very, very lucky. Of course, she could die in the jail. That's been known to happen. Okay. Yeah. Somebody just sent me another mail about the Austin bomber. Now, as you know, Donald Trump is going to set up a new U.S. embassy in Jerusalem. And that drew global condemnation as well. But apparently it's triggered a problem because there's currently a U.S. consulate there, but it's not large enough to serve as a full-on embassy. And so they need to be taking over the hotel right next door. Now, that hotel is actually owned by the U.S. government, but it's been leased to house 450 Soviet immigrants, many of whom are in their 80s. And the question is, where are these 450 people going to go? And nobody has a solution. Israel's a very small place. So is Jerusalem. There's not really a lot of room there. But supposedly the consulate will be promoted to full embassy on May 14th, which is coinciding with the 70th anniversary of Israel's Declaration of Independence, although the red tape may force a postponement. There's been another video coming out of the occupied territories. An Israeli settler from Havet Mor unleashed his dogs to attack sheep being herded by Palestinians in the occupied South Hebron Hills. And this kind of violence has a long history with settlers who, for the most part, go unpunished and are even supported by the Israeli soldiers. Now, this one is still going around. A lot of people are very upset about this. Apparently, U.S. 3rd Air Force Commander, Lieutenant General Richard Clark, basically came on out and said that American troops should be ready to die for Israel and be willing to be placed under Israeli commanders responsible for battlefield decision making. Now, I'm pretty sure that all these kids who signed up for the U.S. military did not sign up to just be given to another country and used as bullet stoppers. And I can imagine they're going to be very upset. I can imagine they're probably not going to be all that motivated to go on out there and be bullet stoppers. But for a U.S. general to say that American troops should be ready to die for Israel, that is an embarrassment. And it does show you just how much of a puppet government we have. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here. Now, over at Axion.com, they have an interesting report. This is just coming out now, but apparently last January at the World Economic Forum in Davos, German Chancellor Angela Merkel met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and said that if Trump pulls out of the Iran nuclear deal, it might lead to the collapse of the entire agreement, and as a result, could trigger a regional war. And on this one, she is correct. The reason the P5+1 agreement is under attack is because of the people who want a war with Iran, Israel first and foremost among them. And we're dangerously close to a regional war. A regional war in the Middle East could quickly bloom to be a full-on global war. That's where we're headed. We all can see what's coming. It's just everybody's waiting for a starting time. Now, you remember in the Congress, in the Senate, there was a bill that was challenging the legality of the Yemen war, noting that Congress never authorized the Yemen war, and this bill would have compelled the U.S. to withdraw its participation. Unfortunately, that bill was voted down 55-44. So Congress has just abandoned its constitutional duty to oversee when we go to wars, as required under the Constitution. All right, let's take a phone call. David in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? David, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that general who said that, a lot of the Christian world believes in Genesis 12:3, which has to do with bless, he who blesses Israel shall be blessed, and on and on. And the thing is, I talk to some of my Christian friends and I say, well, do you believe in blessing your children? They said, yeah. I said, but if your little boy beats up a little girl, what do you do? What do you do? You bless them or you correct them? You correct them. Well, that's a term of blessing. That's a way of blessing too, by correcting. So they give Israel a pass on everything. And what happens is very dangerous because they help us get us in all of these wars. And the thing is, they need to consider that Jesus was over there right now, and there was a pilgrimage of Christians from all over the world, and Jesus was correcting some of the rabbis, the teachers there. They would throw him under the bus, some of these Christians, because they would think, oh, you're going against the chosen people. We're supposed to bless them. They just really missed that whole thing about bless Israel. I'm not saying we shouldn't care for the safety of different countries over there. I'm saying the way they misinterpret that one scripture gets us in a lot of trouble internationally with all these wars.
Well, there's no question that Israel has very skillfully manipulated the Christians of the United States into supporting Israel's agenda, especially looking at the Christian Zionists. They're fully on board. Whatever Israel wants, Israel gets. And they're using that Schofield version of the Bible, that talks about the rapture, and everything happening there at the end. And these people are actually believing that if they can help Israel set fire to the surface of planet Earth, then Jesus is going to come down and invite them all up to the big house.
No, they got to obey the golden rule and help their brothers that are Jewish to obey the golden rule.
Okay, well, thank you very much, David. We got to let you go. We got to do a station identification, and we will be right back with Hour 2. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And let's go back to the phones now. We're going to talk with Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Mike, maybe you can help me out here. I'm trying to figure out all these wars that the globalists seem to want to start, and the neocons and whoever else. Where do they think they're going to get the troops to fight? People are not volunteering that much anymore. Nobody is buying the stuff that they're selling us anymore, like after 9/11, when people really thought we were attacked by 19 Arabs flying 3 planes. Nobody believes this stuff anymore. And as far as a war with Russia, the only people that I was listening to InfoWars earlier, and you were talking about all the people heading for bunkers and stuff like that. And like I said before, what Patriots should do is start surrounding these bunkers, find out where they are, and once it hits the fan, at least Patriots should go into those bunkers rather than the slime that started these wars in the first place. I know you say we should just bury them there, but it's not that easy. But the other thing is, again, maybe if they're going to have a draft, and that's what they would probably need. I'm talking about the localized war, like with Iran and Syria. They would at least have to have a draft. Where do they think they're going to get the troops for the draft? You're going to have riots. You might even have a revolution in this country this time, even more than you had during the 60s. Young people today, the people like the Generation Z and even the millennials, they're wise to what's going on. They don't get their news from mainstream media, and that's all that's going to happen. My son joined the military a few years after 9/11, and he did it as soon as he turned 18, and he did it with my blessing. Okay, because I still believed at that time. I was stupid enough. I still had taken the blue. I still was on a blue pill and thought that it was real. Fortunately, he only stayed in one tour. He's out. And I'm glad, thank God he is. But if he wanted to go join now, I would have told, let's say he was 18 now. I'd told, no way. I would have done everything I could to stop him and discourage him from going in, and including having a talk with a recruiting sergeant who used to hang around his high school there. No. How people going to, you're not even fighting for the United States. You're fighting for big corporations, and you're fighting for Israel. Like you just said, what the General Clark just said. Is his name General Clark?
Yes.
Yeah. How are you gonna sacrifice your kids and tell them to go fight a war for another country that has nothing to do with us. They don't provide anything for us. If anything, we do everything for them. They're not, George Washington said, avoid foreign entanglement. He was so right that people just don't want to listen to this anymore. And the thing with Russia, I mean, I see that, to his credit, Trump is making overtures towards Putin now, wish him credit. And all he's getting is flack from this, from both sides, from the so-called Republicans and so-called Democrats, so-called conservatives and so-called liberals.
Yeah.
All he's getting is flack now. I don't know where these people think, where their heads are at. Maybe they think they got the robots online now, that the robots could fight for it.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. That's a big part of it. Also, they're thinking that they're going to take all these illegal immigrants they've allowed into the country and say, look, we'll give you a green card if you'll take a tour of duty in the war zone. And it's really not.
First sign of problem.
Sorry again. Say again.
I'd say they would run at the first time they have to exchange gunfire because they have nothing to fight for. They wouldn't feel that they're Americans.
Yes.
They would run in a minute.
Well,
it's just like.
Yeah, I mean, there might be some U.S. officers behind them firing machine guns to keep them go forward. That actually has happened in some war zones. They don't show that kind of stuff in the war movies, but yeah, that's what happens. But I think the robot thing, the drones and all of that, the wonder weapons is what the U.S. And the Western countries are relying on. But it's a major strategic mistake. It certainly was the Nazi strategic mistake. They came up with some amazing things. The first stealth aircraft, the first cruise missile, the first ballistic missile. But you can use such weapons to project power and aggression. But if you're going to hold on to territory in order to exploit it, you've got to have boots on the ground. I mean, that was the big lesson out of Vietnam. You cannot win a war from the air.
That's another thing, too, is the Russians have these kind of weapons also. If anything better. You saw those drone submarines they have now. I mean, these are super weapons. So, we're not the only ones that have those things. So I just don't know where these people, I don't know whether they're madmen or they're just delusional, but whatever it is, we got to get a hold of this government and say, no, you're not going to do this to us. And, and stop joining the military. And if you're in the military, get out. It's not worth it now. You're not defending this country. Maybe if you're in the state side, you're defending the country. Maybe if you're, the Coast Guard or something around defending the coast. Other than that, you're not defending this country right now. All you're doing is like Smedley Butler said years ago, doing a bid of the corporations and a foreign country now in Israel. All you're doing. You're not protecting this country. I'm sorry, you're not. You're not protecting this country going to Syria. There's no way you're protecting the United States by going into a country you had no business going into in the first place. You're not protecting the country by backing up the Saudis there in in Yemen. Yep. You're only committing war crimes. That's about it.
That is about it. I think what may explain how insane the situation is, if you go back to General Wesley Clark, he blew the whistle on this plan to basically take over the Middle East. But according to the document he'd seen, this was all supposed to be over and done with in 2008. And the people who are behind the war agenda may realize that it's gone on way too long. They're losing the support of the American people. They've run down our stockpiles. They've worn out our existing weapons. Our new weapons are costly pieces of junk. But they may honestly feel that there's no way to turn back. If they just say, we're over with this and we quit, the U.S. economy would implode. And they would lose power, and they don't want to have that. So they're just going to keep on going forward and hope for the best, no matter how many of other people's children are going to get killed in it. Mark Twain used to write about this in the context of the Civil War, about how people would say, even though the war be wrong, we are in it. We must fight it out. We cannot retire without dishonor. And then, of course,
at least in the Civil War, they were fighting.
I'm sorry?
They're fighting. At least in the Civil War, they were fighting for something. They were fighting to keep the country one, and they were also fighting to eradicate slavery.
Well, the foot soldiers thought they were eradicating slavery. The idea that they were keeping the country united was certainly the agenda higher up. But the war was sold to the northern states with this idea that we have to go on down and free all the slaves.
Well, at least, like I said, that's a noble purpose. But what purpose would it be to go to war now in the Middle East again? Especially after Iraq, after the so-called weapons of mass destruction.
Absolutely.
What purpose? By the way, one of the other things was we were protecting the Kurds because the Kurds are gas. Well, now we're just abandoning the Kurds. We're saying, the heck with the Kurds. And by the way, the Russia's disappointment, they're also abandoning the Kurds. They're also lining up. I don't know what Erdogan has on both the United States and Russia because he's playing both of us as far as that goes. So I don't understand that either. You know, and the poor Kurds, they're the ones that are suffering. They're the one people that never should have gotten a country after World War I, and for whatever reason didn't. No?
Well, it is a messed up situation. Now, as far as the United States and Russia, their interest in Turkey has to do with Turkey's strategic location on the map. And the U.S., despite apparently being behind that attempted coup against Erdogan, they still want him on their side. But they're playing this dual game because, yeah, they want to protect the Kurds. They still have a hope of an independent Kurdistan. But they're going to have to create it by breaking off pieces of other countries, and those other countries don't want to go along with that.
And Turkey won't let them go along with it, even if they do. They already said supposedly they're about ready to invade Iraq again, also Turkey, because they don't want the Kurds on their border there.
Well, Turkey and Iraq just came to an agreement where Turkey can basically deal with the Kurds on their joint shared border. So that's it limits how far into Iraq that the Turkish army can go. But at the very least, they're going to be able to prevent Iraqi Kurds from crossing into Syria and joining in that melee there.
What a mess. What a mess. This wouldn't have happened if they would have left Saddam Hussein alone and they left Gaddafi alone, you know. And that started up with Syria. Everything would, this wouldn't be happening now.
You know, all these countries that the U.S. has meddled in have just deteriorated. You look at photos of Iraq before Desert Storm, and you look at photos of Iraq now, and it's just the place has been destroyed. Same thing with Afghanistan. Same thing with Libya. Same thing's going on now in Yemen. The U.S. is basically bombing all these countries into rubble just for an oil pipeline right of way or access to opium. And it's not an honorable thing.
Another thing, too, they're just opening the door to even more terrorism at some point. This time not for religious reasons, but just because they're so angry at the United States for what we did, they're going to come into this country. And you see how easy it is to conduct terror, even if you're some 24-year-old kid who, I don't know what his problem was, how he had all of Boston on almost in panic. Okay, so just imagine if some of these people, let's say, who think they've been betrayed by the United States or be hurt by the United States, come over here and start and take some of their tactics that they learned. Some of them learned from the U.S. military and start coming over here and doing their thing over here.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's a real danger. I mean, nobody just gets up one day and says, "There's nothing on TV. I'm going to be a terrorist." They become a terrorist when they're just living their own lives in their own countries. They're at the marketplace. There's a hideous explosion, and people they've known all their lives are lying in bloody bits around their feet, and the shrapnel's all stamped "Made in the USA."
Yeah, and they might say that well, this is a religious thing. Allah wants me to do it and all that, but that might be just their excuse. And they might just saying this to give themselves a reason to do what they got to do. I don't know. I don't know what the thinking goes on. All I know is we've got to do something about the neocons and other globalists that are running this country now and running into the ground. If we don't, they're going to destroy not only us, but they're probably going to destroy the planet. Maybe that's what they want. And if they do get to do it, let's at least make sure they don't get into their bunker.
Or never leave them. Or never leave them.
Well,
okay.
Yeah.
Mark, you're breaking up. You're breaking up. We're going to let you go. We're going to take another phone call. We're going to switch over to Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Mike. I was listening to the discussion about Zionism, and I hate to say this, but I know ignorance accounts for a lot of it. They just don't know any better. But Zionist evangelical Christians I mean, at its worst, it's almost like, you know, throughout my life, you hear from time to time and you just shake your head about this mother who, you know, maybe it's the father, biological father, but usually it's some, you know, guy that she's brought into the household, and she's got a daughter. And, you know, at some point she finds out, she sees evidence that the daughter is being molested by this man, maybe that she's brought into the house, you know, a second marriage or whatever. But she doesn't do anything. She looks the other way. I mean, you know, some of it is really almost as bad as that. Because, I mean, a lot of these Zionist Christians have been confronted with truth and you know, a different perspective, and they choose to look away from it. And as far as who's going to fight these battles, well, go back to 1984, I believe, Terminator movie.
Yes.
I think they'll give you a little insight. I imagine they probably have Terminator armies out there already that we don't even know about, that are probably 20 years advance of what we can imagine. You've got drones, aerial drones. They've got all kinds of things to fight weapons. They have biological weapons that they can release anywhere on the planet that they want to.
Yeah, it's very scary out there. And the question is, do they have enough weapons to kill every human being on Earth? Conventionally, no, they don't. We don't know how much biological weapons there are, or even what the latest developments are. But yeah, if all of the nuclear weapons fielded by the United States and all the nuclear weapons fielded by Russia were to be launched and detonated, there would be enough radioactivity to basically wipe out pretty much everybody on Earth. That's what we're risking here. That's how insane all of this is. And, of course, the government, they have their bunkers under places like the Greenbrier. Billionaires are buying their bunkers, and they all think they're just going to go down there for a year and come on out, and everything's going to be sweetness and light. But some of those isotopes left over from fission last a lot longer than a year. And so they're going to come up into an environment where the biosphere may have completely collapsed during that year. And there's nothing to eat. They've already eaten up all their stored food. The plants are all dead. The animals are all dead. What are they going to do?
I imagine a lot of these so-called elites that already have their plans and their escape routes. I imagine a lot of them are going to get stabbed in the back by people they think are their friends. Well, they're going to be looking to take what they've got. I mean, these people, they have no honor. There's no honor among thieves. So a lot of them are going to get it, and they don't even know it from their own people.
Well, I was a big fan of the original Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, and this kind of a situation, being that we were still in the Cold War back then, did provide material for scripts where there's this neighborhood. They've been told there's an incoming attack. There's one family that's built a bunker underground, and everybody else is trying to break into it. And yeah, that's something that's really going to happen. There have actually been experiments done on remote towns where the government comes on in, takes over the radio and TV, and says, we're being invaded, and they watch the reaction. I'm still thinking that this ballistic missile warning that both Hawaii and Japan got within days of each other was such a test. They were seeing how people were going to react when they got the news on the emergency alert system. And that's why I keep telling people, if you're a prepper, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody about it. First of all, unless they're a fellow prepper, you're going to get laughed at. Oh, he's a prepper. They're such kooks and whatever. But the reality is, if something bad happens, yeah, your neighbors are going to turn on you. So if you are a prepper and you've got you better hang onto your guns, because you're going to need them, and you better be prepared to use them.
All right, that's all I got. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a belated shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And let me just get this one thing done and get on back to our little talking points list. Now, Japan, despite all the brouhaha about North Korea, is expressing concern that China is actually the bigger potential threat. And so China right now is dominating Japanese military planning. And that's rather interesting after all the rhetoric about how dangerously out of control North Korea is. All right, let's take a phone call here. Steve Elkins, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Just kind of follow up what Frank was talking about. And you were talking about the nuclear weapons. We would also see a nuclear winter, which would pretty much kill everything off. And then the soil contamination would probably go down at least a foot or more. So I don't know how they figure they can just live on canned goods underground forever and ever, but you wouldn't be able to cultivate anything. Nothing would grow, and they would all be contaminated, what you could have. So it's a dead-end situation. Shouldn't happen, but these people haven't quite thought this out, I guess. I don't think they have.
Well, you know, they're living in this fantasy world that nuclear war is survivable and winnable, and I guess they've grown up on too many movies where there has been a nuclear war and people do survive it, and they do come out of the bunkers, and it's a beautiful, glorious world out there. But you're absolutely right. Steve, we got to do a commercial break. Stay on the line. I want to come back to you after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Steve Elkins. And, Steve, there's something else to consider. It's called bioaccumulation, and what it means is that plants, when they're growing, will tend to pick up a lot of elements they don't really need, including radioactive isotopes. And we all know about the thing that cigarettes cause cancer. And what actually happened is they were growing the tobacco in this cheap mined mineral fertilizer, which included polonium-210, or radioactive material, and the tobacco plants would take the polonium-210 out of the fertilizer, and it would be embedded inside the plant. And that was actually what was causing the cancer for people who were smoking. And the same thing applies to radioactive cleanup. If you've had a radioactive spill, one of the methods they try and get the radiation out of the ground is just plant a lot of greenery, let it grow on up. It'll take up much of the radioactivity with it. Then the plants have to be pulled up and disposed of as radioactive waste. So, yeah, if anybody comes out of their bunkers after a global thermonuclear war, it's not going to be an easy go. The place is still going to be contaminated.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the soil, it's going to be contaminated. I think maybe about a foot down, I read once, somewhere about a foot down, you'd have to scrape all that soil off, and hopefully that would be some soil you could actually grow. But, I mean, it's pointless. It's a slow death if you did survive, and let's just hope we never go that direction. Let's hope.
Well, we seem to be headed that way, and we're hearing now that Trump is making nice with Putin and maybe trying to pull back, but he's got so many people in this country, they think a nuclear war is winnable, they think it's survivable, they think it's going to be great, and for them it's all an abstract. And maybe they're out of their minds on prescription antidepressants, or maybe they've watched too many movies about nuclear weapons and they're saying, gee, I'd like to see one of those things in real life. And I don't know what the rationale is here, but we are risking incineration of the surface of planet Earth and literally exterminating our own kind over pieces of ink and paper. And it's planetary insanity. It really is.
Yeah, I agree. Now, if you believe in the Bible, and I know you're agnostic, you don't have a faith, but more spiritual. But if you believe in the Bible, that the end of the earth will come with fire, so the nuclear holocaust basically could be from nuclear weapons. Maybe that will be the fire if that's so true. Never know.
I think one of Nostradamus' predictions also said there was going to be is interpreted to say that there would be a third world war that would involve absolutely horrific weapons. But if you're living in an area with loose soil and it's been raining a lot, I would say that it's going to be a lot further down than just 2 feet. Actually, somebody ought to go out to Fukushima and do a study about that. That would be a good one. Yeah, we could learn a lot from that. Anyway, Steve, we're going to let you go, and we're going to switch on over to Sovereign Man. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind is psychotronic weaponry. I've never heard you guys talk actually about that.
I'm not sure what the name refers to.
Psychotronics has to do with electrical or electronic warfare that affects the mind.
Okay.
I.e., I mean, we got people walking around looking down in their little rectangles. That's a form of psychotronic warfare. I mean, they don't never look up. They always are looking down. This new 5G network that's going up, it's going to have the ability to manipulate brainwave patterns over whole regions.
I've heard that. I haven't seen anything in the technical specs for 5G that says it can actually steer a person's thoughts. However, like so many other people, I'm concerned that we are living our lives literally bathed in electromagnetic radiation, and that no one source poses a risk, but all of it together, AM, FM radio, computer emanations, appliance emanations, radar, that all of it together does pose a risk to health. And most of that is based on this discovery that was made over at Johns Hopkins called molecular resonance. And it basically was in response to claims by the TSA that their millimeter wave imaging machines didn't produce enough energy to actually harm a molecule in the body. And the Johns Hopkins research said technically it doesn't, but it can start the molecule vibrating, and it can continue to resonate and build up more vibrations until it tears itself apart. Sort of like the Galloping Gertie Bridge over the Tacoma Narrows. You've probably all seen that video. The question is, we often really don't know what's going on with this technology. Back in the 1960s, if you went into a shoe store, you would see a shoe store fluoroscope where you would put your feet in to see if your shoes were fitting properly. And the Surgeon General came on out with a video about how this was a good idea so that you would have comfortable shoes and you could stand at your factory jobs all day. Then all the shoe store clerks started dying of cancer. And they realized that this constant bombardment of x-rays from these machines was to blame. And it still took until the mid-1980s to get all those machines shut down. Okay? Anyway, listen, Sovereign Man, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back.
Can't hold me over. I haven't replied.
I really do need to let you go. We'll be right back after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And let's see. As you know, China has been very upset with the U.S. over the tightening of relations with Taiwan. And this is one of those situations that's just sort of been hovering on the edge of instability for a very, very long time. Now, mainland China views Taiwan as a troublesome province, while Taiwan is saying it's a sovereign, independent nation. And it's sort of been in that area of tension. But with this move by the U.S. To basically improve relations with Taiwan, in effect, it is diplomatically recognizing Taiwan's position that it is a sovereign, independent government. And apparently, the Chinese military have deployed an aircraft carrier to the waters off of Taiwan. And they're basically threatening war with either Taiwan or the U.S. if the U.S. goes any further along this diplomatic path. And with the tensions in the South China Sea and the tensions over North Korea, that is another flashpoint where a major war could break out. Now, the U.S. is officially admitting they're running 7 wars right now, and they're not doing very well in most of them. Still stuck in Afghanistan, never leaving Iraq, losing in Syria, probably losing in Afghanistan as well, Libya, the proxy war in Yemen, Niger, Somalia, and they probably got a few other covert interventions going we don't know about. Now, Lavrov is warning the U.S. presidential administration that provocateurs are out to sabotage Trump's meeting with Kim Jong-un, that they want to sort of poison the water before the meeting even happens, or otherwise head it off with maybe actual war. They don't want to see Trump come to a deal with North Korea because they know the next step after that is that North and South Korea would reunite, and that means North Korea would be basically safe because we're buddy-buddy with South Korea. We depend on them for a lot of products. My Hyundai is made in South Korea, for example. And of course, there's that issue about the One Road, One Belt initiative in China, basically running another branch of it down into South Korea to make it easier and less expensive to transport South Korean goods to Europe. And the shipping companies don't want that to happen. And with a divided Korea, that One Belt, One Road project would stop at the DMZ. Now, Trump has just announced that he's going to boost exports of lethal drones to more U.S. allies. He's going to make it easier to export certain types of lethal U.S.-made drones to potentially dozens more allies and partners. So, yeah, they're planning on fighting and winning World War III primarily with robotic equipment. Wonder weapons. So we'll see. Now, a top nuclear commander, U.S. Air Force General John Hyten, he's commander of the Strategic Command, said that Russia and China are aggressively pursuing hypersonic weapons, a type of nuclear missile that flies at a very high speed. And according to the general, the U.S. doesn't have any type of nuclear weapon that can defend against a hypersonic missile, so we need to get to work. In other words, we the American people have to make do with less so the military can have even more that they do. By the way, that hypersonic missile that Putin revealed on his State of the Union speech apparently is slated to go into active service the 1st of next year. Just a few months away. They're that close to it. All right, so let's talk about the economic news here. Deutsche Bank has plunged to a 16-month low. The bank credit risk spikes. These are all bad indicators. The stock market today was just a roller coaster. It was all over the place, but it ended in the red. Not too badly in the red, but it ended in the red. And now we've got some interesting developments on the petrodollar. And it looks like China and actually the Shanghai International Energy Exchange is going to unveil an oil futures contract denominated in Chinese yuan rather than U.S. dollars. And experts are warning that the growing clout of Chinese currency in international financial markets could erode the primacy of the U.S. dollar, which is something obviously the U.S. bankers and the U.S. government do not want to see happen, because it is the world's dependence on that dollar that allows the U.S. government to exert control over other nations. And, of course, it's a big profit maker for the Federal Reserve and for importers. Under the Bretton Woods agreement, under the Petro deal agreement, countries have to get U.S. dollars to buy natural resources. How do they get those dollars? They can either borrow them at interest from the Federal Reserve, or they can send the United States manufactured goods and agricultural produce in exchange for these boxes of ink and paper, actually numbers in the computer. But you get the drift here. It's a sweet deal. And it's because our nation and our economy became overdependent on this automatic flow of wealth and goods into this country that we've allowed our manufacturing to decline over the last 30 years. And when you add in that horrible gamble with genetically modified produce, nobody wants to buy that. In fact, Claire and I were just over at the local big box store, and we were noticing how many of those packages now say no GMO. So the food manufacturers are getting wind of what the people actually want. They're realizing GMO is the kiss of death. Now, it could conceivably be lying, and there could be GMO in there, but at least they know that there's an issue out there. So let's see. Yes, we already have that one. Russia continues to hoard gold at the fastest pace in 12 years. And according to the Central Bank of Russia, gold reserves spiked to 455 billion between March 2nd and 9th, hitting a historic high not seen since September 2014. They understand when the global economy corrects that ink and paper is not going to be worth anything. Even the cryptocurrencies are probably not going to be worth anything. They've been having a rough time as it is. You need a commodity-based wealth storage medium. Gold, failing that silver, or any of the other metals that are used as investment. Platinum, tantalum. They're even selling copper rounds in bars now as investment. That's a little mind-blowing. When I was a kid, copper is what they made the plumbing out of. It's a hardware store. Now, the United States is, once again, threatening to sanction European firms who are involved in the Russian gas project, the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. And the U.S. justification for that is they claim the Russian project undermines energy security in Europe. No, it doesn't. It's just another pipeline. But somebody else is going to make the money off of the transit fees. Look how many of these conflicts that we're in right now actually began over a pipeline debate. Afghanistan, oil companies wanted a gas pipeline through Afghanistan. Afghanistan wanted to charge them a fair price for it. The oil company consortium went over to Congress and said it's actually going to be cheaper if you invade and regime change them. That's what the U.S. did. They invaded Afghanistan, and they put in a new government headed by Hamid Karzai, who had also been one of the representatives before Congress on behalf of UNOCAL. Now, it's thought that the decision to go into Syria was triggered by Syria's refusal to allow Israel to build a pipeline across their territory so that Israel could send the oil and gas they were even then stealing from under the Golan up to European markets. I wonder what it's going to be like when we start having wars over water, which we've already had. Israel wants that Litani River. Okay, now, with all these sanctions and all these tariffs, it's beginning to look like Trump has basically declared war on the World Trade Organization. And the EU is saying, we got to have a plan B. And they're scrambling for a response. It could all come apart. We might actually go back to supply and demand. Horror of horrors. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is basically thinking about lifting import tariffs. And it's certainly going to end up hurting Pakistan. And the Pakistan's Federal Board of Revenue believes CPEC could well up destroying the Pakistani industry and take away any incentive for Chinese companies to manufacture in Pakistan. So we may see some tensions building between China and Pakistan. Tensions already there between Pakistan and India. Everybody's on edge. Everybody knows what's coming. We're just waiting for a starting time. We're waiting for that false flag that makes it all look moral and right and justified here. More retail Mageddon. And Claire and I were down here at the local Toys R Us, and the Babies R Us, and they're both going to close in a month. And that's going to be an issue. There are no more toy stores in this immediate area. But Carpet-Rite, Mother Care, Claire's Accessories, they're closing down shops, shutting branches this year. People just don't have money. Israel has all the money. Wall Street has all the money. The military has all the money. There's nothing left out here to conduct a commerce with. Now, over at 12160.info, they have an article that should make people wake up. Apparently, there's been a study that reveals the volume of cryptocurrency trading is being faked by the major exchanges. And that's another reason why I'm glad I didn't get too involved in the cryptocurrency. All right, let's take a phone call now. Charlie in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
A couple of things, Mike. Yeah, the pipeline construction is uprooting people. That's where a lot of our refugees are coming from. The biggest pipeline and the biggest problem is the Mosul to Haifa, Israel pipeline that was built years ago, but it's being restored. And Israel's going to get the oil for free. But you see, in order for that to work, You have to get Assad out of Syria because he's too risky. So a lot of this is all about that pipeline coming out of Iraq going to Israel. That could almost be considered top secret, but it's out there. The news about that's out there. So we'll see what's going to happen. If anything's going to break open into a fight, it's going to be over this pipeline because it's going to deliver a steady flow of oil to Israel. Now, if Israel gets into a war, they've only got enough oil for about 3 weeks because they have to buy it on the open market. They're buying most of their oil from Russia currently.
Yes.
And the Arabs have boycotted them. So they need this pipeline, but Assad is a problem. So we'll see what happens. That's all I got to say for today. Thanks for taking my call.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to let you go. And, you know, it almost reminds me of Dune by Frank Herbert. And there's been a movie of it, which wasn't all that good. And there was a miniseries that was better. But as you read the book, and I recommend reading the book, big, thick book, you're not going to finish it in one night. But they had a commodity that was called spice. And it came from this planet called Arrakis. And it basically kept you young forever. And because of its importance, the whole society was basically shaped around maintaining that flow of spice and profiting from it. And it's a nice little parallel for our current situation, where the oil, the flow of oil, has to be protected. It has to be supported. It has to be nurtured. And all of the considerations are secondary. Like that big argument they had up on the Sioux Reservation about these pipelines do leak. They contaminate water. They contaminate the soil. But the pipeline must go on. Now, according to some of the documents released by Edward Snowden, the NSA has been working to track down users of Bitcoin. And apparently the idea of direct commerce between the people outside the view of government is viewed as a threat. And government wants to control how money moves. And so, yeah, they're trying to either find the Bitcoin users or find a way to track it or just make it go away entirely, which obviously is the solution favored by the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve does not get interest payments on Bitcoins. Now, over in Israel, Netanyahu is defending the building of an Egyptian border fence, and he had an interesting comment about that. The influx of African migrants is more dangerous than terrorism. And he's basically saying that without that border fence, there's going to be over 1 million migrants trying to get into Israel. And see, it's okay for Israel to have a border fence. But here in this country, the liberals are screaming bloody murder. No, 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 no. Everybody has a right to come on in here. Muslims, terrorists, people with contagious diseases, they all have a natural right to come on in here. No, they don't. Every nation has a right to control the border and decide who comes in and who does not, to welcome in people who will be of benefit to society and to keep out people who would not be of benefit to society. That's just common sense. Now, over in France, illegal immigrants and far left activists invaded the Basilica of St. Denis on Sunday to protest the French government's new asylum law. France is cracking down. They're making it tougher to become a citizen. And around 80 illegal immigrants and activists basically came on in and caused a ruckus, which resulted in evening mass being canceled. Now, this basilica is historically important. It's where many of the French kings are buried. But apparently police had to be called to remove the protesters and the illegal immigrants, and the church decided to cancel the evening mass out of concern that more protesters were going to show up. Okay, we're going to take a break for some commercials here, and we come on back, more about immigration, more about science, more about human-caused global warming. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here. Now, the Supreme Court is forcing the state of Arizona to continue issuing driver's licenses to the so-called dreamers after refusing to hear a state challenge to the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA. And DACA, as you know, protects hundreds of thousands of young illegal immigrants who came to the United States illegally as children. They were brought by their parents, also illegals. Now, this technically puts the Supreme Court in violation of Title VIII. And yes, it's a liberal Supreme Court, but until they actually declare Title VIII unconstitutional, it is the law of the land. And I'm sorry that these young children were brought here by their parents as illegal immigrants, but that's the parents' fault. And we are under absolutely no obligation to treat them any differently than we would any other illegal immigrant. Open borders are destroying Europe. Open borders are destroying the United States of America. The European Union and the U.S. government have gone absolutely nuts. Or they've simply sold out to George Soros and the globalists, who think all this blending together is a good idea. And all those social justice warriors are out there saying, well, you're just being racist, you know, and everybody has a right to come to the United States. There's some facts about the sanctuary cities that you need to keep in mind. Since 9/11, 63,000 American citizens have been murdered by illegal immigrants. 63,000. Now, the corporate media is just making a huge thing about all these people killed by guns. We've got to ban guns. Okay. Well, look at all the people killed by illegal immigrants, and we already have laws that ban them. Why are they not being enforced? It's ridiculous. And it's spreading, unfortunately. Up in Canada, Justin Trudeau has set some new election rules. Apparently there's more censorship, limiting political reporting, and he's dropped the voter ID requirement. Trudeau has simply said, no, people voting in Canada don't need an ID. And they have their share of illegal immigrants and refugees who are going to be exploited by the liberals to maintain power. Now, the other day, we were talking about this star of Sex and the City, the television series and movie, Cynthia Nixon, who has announced she's going to run against Mario Cuomo for the governorship of New York. And this immediately triggered an attack by Alan Dershowitz, who denounced Nixon as a bigot for supporting an artist who refused to perform in the illegal West Bank settlement of Aiea. It's a real long thin. But I'll tell you, New Yorkers ought to vote for Cynthia just to send a message that we are tired of having our internal affairs run through the filter of what Israel wants. We'll be back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And speaking of nuclear war being a bad idea, I just got this in the email, basically responding to one of our earlier callers regarding the justification for nuclear war. And the email goes, they justify nuclear war by believing the planet is overpopulated. Anyway, so in this demented mind thinking, they feel they are really helping the planet by removing the bottom feeders. They saw that Japan survived World War II, so they believe all nuclear wars are eventually survivable. Well, the 2 nuclear weapons that were, and there were only 2, were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were very small. Something like 15 kilotons, I think, somewhere around there. They were very, very small, but they were enough to wipe out a city. In this nuclear war, we're talking thousands of nuclear weapons that are hundreds of times more powerful. Now, I agree the planet is overpopulated, especially every time I get out there and try and drive on the H1. But, sex is a lot more fun than dying, and that's why we're overpopulated. But if you're going to do it with a nuclear war, you're going to destroy all the infrastructure as well. I know there are people who are out there saying that they want to control the population with vaccines. And there have already been a couple of scandals where the free vaccine programs being offered by the World Health Organization are actually sterilizing women so they cannot have children. And I think it's a horrible thing to do, but it's certainly preferable to outright nuclear war. No, I think these people are committed to continuing this war agenda. even though they may be having doubts about whether they can succeed or not, because they can't turn around. They can't admit defeat. I think the only reason the U.S. is still in Syria is they don't want to admit they've lost that one. Ditto for Afghanistan. But the justification for nuclear war is that maybe they're already realizing that against Russia and China, against true military peers, the U.S. cannot win a conventional war. That demonstration that Trump arranged with those 60 cruise missiles against that Syrian airfield was a major embarrassment. So maybe that's why they're talking nuclear war, nuclear war. Paul Craig Roberts was saying that he's actually heard people inside Washington, D.C. arguing for a unprovoked first strike, decapitation strike on Russia using nuclear weapons. Just go ahead and get it over with. Now, getting on back down to that Florida school shooting, David Hogg, the crisis actor, is now urging others to use white privilege to ensure gun violence in black communities is heard. Well, yeah, I think it would be a good idea if people were to start looking at violence in contexts other than white on black. Let's look at black on black. Let's look at black on white. The numbers are rather amazing. Now, as you know, a week ago, there was this mass walkout of students across the country, supposedly to go on up and, argue for strict gun control, exploiting the kids. And apparently, at Harbor Elementary School, a group of 5-year-olds were taken out of class and basically went on out to march for gun violence. The problem was the principal of the school didn't know about the march, and there were no written permission slips from the parents. The teacher just went ahead and did it. And by walking these 5-year-olds out of the class and onto this march, she's basically placing them in danger. Now, getting on over to that Maryland shooting, and I mentioned this to one of the callers earlier, I've concluded that was a real incident. Wasn't staged, wasn't fake. Apparently, the young girl who was shot had been in a relationship with the shooter and apparently had dumped him and was now with a new boyfriend, and that was the motive there. Inappropriate reaction. I still want to know if the shooter was on prescription antidepressants, because we know that's a problem. That is definitely a problem. Now, I linked to, believe it or not, Snopes, who normally I ignore because they're obviously liberal gatekeepers, but they had an interesting chart about causes of death in the United States. And the chart basically goes for the first half of 2016. And the number one entry, cause of death in the United States, was abortion. Murder by firearm was absolutely at the bottom. And that goes back to that comment I made about all the American citizens who've been killed by illegal immigrants since 9/11. Now, YouTube has hopped on the gun control bandwagon. They're now banning all videos that talk about guns, that show how guns are used, that teach gun safety. YouTube has now banned them all, according to this article that we got in governmentslaves.info. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, again, down in Florida, boy, those poor Floridians, apparently a 16-year-old Florida boy basically beat his friend to death with a baseball bat, alleging that the teen was jealous of his friend's relationship with a girl. Boy, the hormones must be flowing there. So, by golly, it's time we ban baseball. Doesn't serve any useful purpose. The reality is that if you ban guns, the only group that benefits from a gun ban is the government, because then they can basically go on and abuse the people even more than they're doing it already. when you're talking about incidents of interpersonal violence, if a gun is not available, they'll use something else. When I was living in Southern California, when I was in high school, the next door neighbor's kid got arrested for trying to kill somebody with an axe, which he actually borrowed from us, saying he needed to take out a tree stump. Now, the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point is reportedly discussing a plan to eliminate 13 majors, including English, philosophy, history, and Spanish. What they want to do is turn themselves from a university into a trade school, where they're going to offer classes that prepare people for employment, for jobs which actually aren't out there. And I can understand the thinking when they're basically financially challenged. But if people want to learn a trade, there are trade schools out there. People go to university to get a worldly education. They go to university for these worldly majors, these classes. If you're not going to have these classes, you're not a university anymore. More from the field of political correctness. Apparently, there's yet another Confederate War Memorial in downtown Dallas that is about to come down. The city council vote signaled the time had come for the reminders of the country's racist past to go. Now, the Confederacy, the Civil War, was not about racism. It wasn't even really about slavery. Abraham Lincoln actually said that if he could have brought the Union back together and left the slaves, he would have been perfectly willing to do that. Lincoln also said that he was morally opposed to the idea of slavery, but if there were going to be masters and slaves, he preferred the whites remain the masters. It was about independence of the sovereign states. And apparently Washington, D.C. and the liberals think that's a dangerous idea. They don't want us thinking about independence and sovereign states and states' rights. Maybe that's why the universities stopped the history courses. Don't want you knowing your history. Don't want you knowing any history. Just believe what we tell you here. Now, here's a fun article. This came out of Investment Watch blog. And actually, I think it originally came from leftcult.com. And it's 15 completely insane things about babies, biology, race, and genetics that liberals actually believe. Serious. These are all documented. The first belief is human babies are born as being genderless, who are then spontaneously assigned gender at birth. And the assignment is entirely subjective and subject to change at any time, which is why LGBT are demanding that states issue genderless birth certificates. I'm sorry, your gender is determined by, to put it politely, the plumbing. Another thing they believe is that babies up to 5 years old can be justifiably murdered by their parents in a type of infanticide called post-birth abortion. This is all justified by claiming that since toddlers can't talk, they aren't conscious beings. And there's actually a video of somebody saying that. It can't be 5 years old. We've got a 2-year-old over here who's already talking. It's ridiculous. Something else they believe is that human beings can magically and spontaneously switch their gender from male to female or the other way around at will with no Jedi training required. Merely wishing to alter your gender accomplishes it to such an extent that leftists actually believe biological men can get pregnant. Now, this is going to come as a bit of a shock to all those plastic surgeons who are making huge amounts of money on the sexual reassignment surgeries. Another thing that they believe is that trans women who are born as biological men are able to conceive children and give birth. And they believe that because the corporate media keeps reporting on transgender men are giving birth to children, when the truth is they're still biologically women. And even CNN reported that a transgender man gave birth to a human baby. That's the headline that they used. Leftists believe that men can have periods. And they're actually lobbying to have tampon dispensing machines installed in men's restrooms across university campuses in America, including at Brown University, where students and faculty actually think men can menstruate. Probably because it begins with men. Whoops, we just lost our internet connection. Mike, can you hear me?
You're still good.
I'm still good. All right, this is Twitch being twitchy again. We probably lost our text message board as well. Now, according to the left, genetics has no role whatsoever in biology because genetics can be nullified or overwritten by wishing to be something other than what your genetics expresses. Well, I put that one to the test. I spent all last night wishing to look just like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and today I still look like Michael Rivero. Now, this is actually a natural progression from the original platform of the liberal philosophy, that genetics plays no role in the development of your mind. And that goes all the way back to Margaret Mead and Coming of Age in Samoa, which has been repeatedly exposed as an intellectual scientific fraud. But apparently, this is so prevalent, Netflix actually began deleting genetic science chapters in their videos. Don't want you to know about the XXXY chromosomes. Apparently teaching children about genetics is considered dangerous. We're not here to teach real science. We're here to indoctrinate. Something else that they believe, and we have seen tragically repeated, all biological men who claim to be women should be allowed to compete in women's sports, claims progressives, beating the biological women and nullifying all the sports records set by real women. This is all somehow accomplished in the name of equality, even when female wrestlers who are doping on steroids to become men are still allowed to compete against women and win state championships. Another one of their beliefs, white people who want to be black people can magically claim to be black at any moment, after which it's perfectly okay for them to apply for black scholarships, financial aid, and college entrance positions reserved for African Americans. This is also called equality. Even when white people are basically grabbing black scholarships from black people. But if you challenge it, you're being racist. Old white women who want to be considered women of color can magically claim to be Native Americans. Now, Elizabeth Warren already pulled this one off, climbing the ladder of academia under the guise of being Native American, even though she refuses to take a DNA test to confirm this. Now, since people can magically claim to be male, female, black, or white by merely wishing it so, the left must also accept transageism, which allows dirty old men to proclaim themselves to be 13-year-old girls and to demand to join the girls' volleyball team in the middle school and to share the shower and the locker room. The reality of transageism is now actually being claimed by LGBT. And they actually believe that biological age is entirely subjective and can be overcome by simply deciding to be decades younger. Now that's ridiculous. We are all aging. We're all getting old. Claire and I are old. We're feeling the deteriorations of age. We'd love to be younger. We wish to be younger. It's just not working. It's ridiculous. And when you look at this list, you have to realize it's absurd. It is really absolutely absurd. And like I said, it's the natural progression. They're living in a fairy world where wishes come true. When you wish upon a star, makes no difference where you are. That's it. They're living in a fantasy world where they can become any gender, any age, any race that they want. And they expect everybody else to go along with it. I self-identify as a very wealthy talk radio host. The money still hasn't come on in. Now, we have been talking before about the rise of autism in the United States. The incidence, per capita incidence, is rising spectacularly. And there does seem to be considerable evidence that links it back to vaccines. It turns out that Alzheimer's is also starting to skyrocket. 5.7 million people have it, and it's costing the U.S. $277 billion a year to take care of these people. Is Alzheimer's something that's also being triggered by heavy metals in vaccines? They're still not sure what causes Alzheimer's. It's a big, big, big mystery. A lot of theories. A lot of people think aluminum, that you should avoid uncoated, untreated aluminum cookware. But then they put aluminum in vaccines, don't they? So,
Got
let's
Al in
talk.
Canada.
Say again?
Have a caller Al in Canada in case you're not getting messages.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not seeing the text message. Okay, Al in Canada, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Doing fine.
Great. I sent you a link
Yes,
to a CBC article that came out today.
I'm looking at it right now.
And Services Canada is now dropping the Mr. and Mrs.
Okay.
So this nonsense is up here. And, of course, we have Pierre Elliott Trudeau's son, Justin, up here as our prime minister.
Yes.
And not that long ago, he was doing these scripted town hall meetings, and a girl had stood up and referenced a gender, and he interrupted her with his hand, and went, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! We don't like to say that. We like to use the term people kind." So, and of course, he got it. He got a pretty good shellacking for that, as he should have.
Yes.
But this stuff is running rampant. It's absolute BS. Even under the comments, you can see the top comments there. No one agrees with it. And you know what, Mike? I read these comments every day. And funny thing about the first few comments, top comments,
yeah,
they're diehard liberals. I mean, they are liberals. There's one guy there, Richard Sharp. It's obviously not his real name, but that's what he calls himself. This guy would literally come on and just give it to people that would put down the prime minister. As it almost like he had tears in his eyes when he was posting this stuff. It's
okay,
just nonsense.
Al, stay on the line. We've got to do some commercials. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking with Al in Canada. And Al, yeah, I was reading that article. It really is ridiculous. But what this all amounts to, this is an attack on our sense of identity, our sense of self, to basically get us so confused we don't really know who we are, because that will make it easier to control us. And the way you fight back is you reassert your sense of self. And you say, I don't care about all this other nonsense. I'm a man, and I'm this mix of ethnic groups, and I'm this age, and you just stick to reality. And all these other liberals out there saying, no, you can just wish yourself anything. It's an attack on our history, on our identity. That's what taking down all these monuments is all about. That's what shutting down all these courses in college is all about. They're just pushing to turn us into this herd of soldier/workers/breeders. That's it.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Mike, if I were younger, I would go into the nearest, whatever it would be, Service Canada. They're now called Service Canada offices, right, where you go to collect unemployment, welfare, and all that nonsense. If I were younger, Mike, when I was a young fellow, I used to be a pretty bad buck. I'd walk in there, I strip down naked, I say, guess what gender I am?
Yeah.
But I also sent you another link on an article on the CBC. Here's and the bitter irony is,
I think we just lost Al.
Dollars per man, woman, and child. Hello?
Yeah, we lost your connection for a second.
You couldn't hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. So I sent you another link as well, and it has to do with freedom of speech being stifled. And the bitter irony is, I actually posted in the Canadian Constitution where it talks about freedom of speech and, freedom of this and that in Canada, and the content disabled it. What a crock of crap. I mean, you have obviously your media outlets in the United States that are probably heavily funded by taxpayers that you don't even know about. In Canada, we have the CBC, the Censorship Board of Canada. And, concerning the first link I sent you about this gender nonsense, I don't know whether you caught it or not, because I guess I was cut off or something or on pause, but if I were younger, I would go into one of these Service Canada offices, and I would strip down naked and just yell out, guess what gender I am.
Yeah, we did get that
and
part.
I wouldn't bother me at all. Oh, you did? Okay. I'm too old to be in jail now, you know what I mean? I don't think there's a corner tight enough for me to fit in so I can see everything. But, this is just, it's got to end. This has got to end, and I'm afraid that it's probably not going to end well. I really am. Like, people are just getting upset. I mean, obviously, in the United States, in your country, I mean, there's a lot of nonsense going on. It's actually, it's at the point where it's ridiculous because, Mueller's doing this investigation still, and there's nothing there. Why is it still going on? I don't understand it.
They're just trying to find anything that they can do to get Trump out. They want him out. He's not part of them. He's not part of the liberal agenda. He's not going to maintain the cover-ups. They're all afraid that they're going to be going to jail if any of these scandals really start to break out into the public. And that's why they're all basically, circling the wagons around Hillary because they are all part and parcel with the crime she committed, obstruction of justice, possible espionage. And if she goes down, she's going to take all of them down with her. She's already made that abundantly clear.
Good. That's what you need. You need these people being taken down and actually being thrown in jail, or even worse, because, this stuff has been going on in your country for a long, long, long time. It's about time that the people heal. That your country is on the verge of something just horrible.
Yes.
And, I've been to the United States. I spent a lot of time in the United States, and the people are great. There's nothing wrong with the people. It's these idiots that think they can control everything, and they want to control everything, and they just divide, and they divide, and they divide, and they don't stop. And they don't realize that one day they're going to push you people too far, and there's not going to be any way backward.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, right now, liberalism has almost become a caricature of itself. It's gotten that silly. And especially all this LGBT nonsense and this idea that, you can wish yourself to a different race. I mean, it really is nonsense. It does show they're living at fantasy land. They're not able to deal with reality. And, that's a dangerous situation when you have that much of the population who are just disconnected from the real world. And again, I don't know. Maybe they're all on prescription antidepressants. Apparently something like, 25% of America are on these drugs. We may be looking at them.
Mike, the drug problem too, I think the pharmaceutical drug problem. It's up here too as well in Canada. There are older people that are on medication they should never be on. And I know it for a fact. I've seen it. Thanks a lot for your time.
All right. Thanks a lot. We're going to take another break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to the phones, somebody just sent me this story, and it's coming out of Mediaite.com, and it's talking about this guy up in Canada, 52-year-old Canadian father of 7 children, Stephanie Walsh, now self-identifies as a 6-year-old girl. This is not The Onion. This is actually happening. And the guy says, I can't deny I was married. I can't deny I have children. But I've moved forward now, and I've gone back to being a child. I don't want to be an adult right now. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Herman in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Just this past Sunday evening was the Hebrew New Year. So I'm guessing that within 304 days from that date, I'm guessing that the following 5 things will occur. The 116th Congress will try to impeach Trump. A man from Turkey will be the leader of 3 Mideast countries, and then 7 more countries from the Mideast will give him control. The 3rd temple will be allowed to be built, and don't be surprised if the 2 witnesses appear in Jerusalem.
All right. Well, I do know that
we'll see how much. Go ahead.
The Sanhedrin has actually started reaching out to Arabs, believe it or not, to start preparing for the construction of the 3rd temple. I don't know what the reaction of the Arabs was, but yeah, they still want to go on and do it. The problem is it's not really the 3rd temple. It will be the 4th one. There was the 1st temple, which was actually down on Mount Moriah, and then they built the 2nd temple, which is on the Temple Mount. That was Herod's time. And then in Herod's time, there was a 3rd temple built. But since the Messiah didn't show up after it was built, they went back and said, well, it wasn't really a new temple. It was just sort of a renovation. So that doesn't count. And so now they want to build a new 3rd temple. And I think they ought to move it back to where it originally was on Mount Moriah and let the Muslims keep, the current Temple Mount. Because what they're saying is like the western wall of the 2nd temple. That's actually the remains of an old Roman fort that was built on that hill to control the city. The population was revolting against Roman rule, every couple decades.
In 68 AD, which temple was destroyed?
I'd have to go back and look at that. And in any event, Herman, because I'm not really a religious program here, and I got a bunch of callers and a bunch of news, I'm going to have to let...
I'm done.
All right, we're going to let you go and switch over to Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. I'll try to make this brief, but I had a very interesting day on March 14, 2018. And my cat in the morning couldn't make up her mind about going outdoors. She's getting older, and I said, you just make up your mind. I left the door ajar. I said, push it open, push on through when you want to go out, Zoe. And I left it at that, got dressed, and I heard some voices at the front door saying, ma'am, and I went to the front door, just got my clothes on just in time, came to the front door. There were 2 police there, and they said, there was a really dangerous man in the neighborhood, and they thought maybe he might have entered my home because he's been going up to all the neighbors. He wound up going into my next door neighbors and using his cell phone because my next door neighbor was out to the east of me, was out in the yard, and he could use his cell phone and call his wife. My neighbor said he was kind of disoriented. Well, after the police left, my painter that was painting the deck from earlier that morning came around and said, what were the cops doing? I said, oh, they saw my door open. They want to make sure I was okay. We have really nice place here. And he said, well, they pulled a taser on him and didn't shoot him or anything. But he said, so I was talking to the painter when we heard this powerful explosion. It was like, bang, real, it just is real. It's like somebody's gas had exploded. And we saw this black cloud billowing up. And this is at the beginning of the street to the left on the west side, where before our road cuts off there's a little man back there, and this black smoke. It went off to the north, and I'm south of it. So thank God it didn't blow on us. But there's a man that lives back in there. And he looks like a recluse. I mean, the neighbors say he's really nice, but the house back in there, this black kind of dark brownish rock house, and never ever mowed his yard, but it's further off the road, so no one minds too much. Well, evidently he had 2 mobile homes.
Sherry,
yes.
where's this going? Because you're kind of rambling.
Oh, well, it's going to be 2 more explosions that were behind his house. One was they were both occupied by drug addicts, and one had been going to rehab. I knew this because 2 days before that I had reported to the police a suspicious person in the area, and it felt significant. So that's how I heard about those drug addicts living back there in the woody area. And at the same time that these 3 residents were blowing up, because the second and third were closely behind. And this is the beginning of all these bombings in San Antonio and Austin and everything. It's like, and these were propane explosions. There was a water break in the middle of the road, so that made getting water hard for the trucks. I don't know if that was planned to slow down the burning of the houses and mobiles. But, you know, I was spending so much time out there talking to the neighbors next door, and one house had ammunition, full of ammunition. It was going off like crazy.
Yeah, that can be very, very dangerous.
Well, the guy next to me, I said, shouldn't we be getting out of the way? Because it was just like a block away. And he said, you know, you have to have something to propel it, like a gun or something. Just going off in the cases, you know, it's not going to come over here. We were far enough away. But, you know, by the time I got back to the house, that water break, I have a bad water heater that I've been griping about for someone to come out.
Sherry.
My house flooded. That's the bottom. My house flooded.
All right.
Okay, that was my March 14th.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely a crazy day there. Anyway, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're running out of time, and I've got one more call I'm going to take, then we're going to close the lines, and I got to finish some news here. So thank you, Sherry. We're going to let you go. We're going to change over to Milton in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Milton. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, global warming nor'easter here in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
So much for that. I was on the YouTube. I was on it this afternoon. I find all the gun information I want on there. It's still posted. But my main question, reason why I called was...
Apparently, they've just started this, and actually, I got an email on this. This is actually being reported by Yahoo News. Apparently the ban is not on tutorials, but it's videos that sell guns and accessories. So, you know, and they may just be starting this.
They call it Hickok 45. He's a well-learned man, you know, and you can trust what he does. And I grab it and I record it because if they do go missing, at least I'll learn something. But the main crux of the reason I called was on the iodine for like nuclear attack. What kind do you want? And is there a dose?
Well, basically the dosage is going to be on the bottle, and it's actually potassium iodate that you want to stockpile in the event of a radioactive incident.
Okay, iodate. Okay, and then one last thing before you go. On the donate button up there, okay, if I use my card, okay, is that secure?
It's as secure as PayPal can make it be, because that button goes to PayPal, and you can donate money from a credit card using PayPal. But if I'm actually kind of uncomfortable with you borrowing money to send it to me, and so I'm going to ask you to pass.
All right, then make a check, and then I'll find the address there somewhere.
Yeah, the address is if you go up at the very top.
Okay.
Right underneath the green banner, there's a small row that says Home, WRH Store, Reader Emails, Email, WRH, Advertise, Radio Podcast, and Donate. And under that Donate page, there's the postal address.
Okay. Well, I'll let you go then and tie you up. You got important things to do. Thank you very much for all that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we're going to close the phone lines now because I got some stuff I need to get to. We're getting close to the end of the show. Very interesting timing about him talking about human-caused global warming in Pennsylvania. The eastern seaboard is getting their 4th nor'easter in a row. It's called Winter Storm Toby. 75 million Americans on alert. 4,000 flights have been canceled. They're predicting a foot of snow from West Virginia to Massachusetts. This is the first full day of spring that this is all happening on. Now, over in Great Britain, they're getting slammed again. It's Beast from the East 3.0 on the way. And the global warming people are out there saying, yeah, this is all caused by human-caused global warming. You know, of course it is. Global warming causes this hard winter weather. You just have to believe me. I'm a scientist. I got a clipboard and a white coat and everything. So they're still trying to salvage that. Al Gore has traveled to Dubai, And he's warning that global warming is triggering flying rivers and rain bombs. Now, a flying river is just an area of extreme moisture. We were talking about the one that is currently aimed at Southern California. But that may be more the result of that unexplained heat source off the coast of the Pacific Northwest than anything else. Here's where it gets really, really bizarre. There is this senator, Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island, basically said in a speech on the Senate floor yesterday that climate deniers are guilty of a grave sin and listening to evil voices instead of listening to the oceans. And if you think that one is out there, okay, a local Washington, D.C. lawmaker, Democrat Trayon White Sr., literally came on out and made this comment that Jews are controlling the climate. And this was reported by Breitbart News. Yeah, I think we got to run drug scans on all of these people. They're not making any sense at all. Now, they've just had elections down in Australia. And down in South Australia, all the candidates who were pushing climate change and global warming and wind power and solar power basically got voted out or severely weakened because electricity prices have just gone through the roof in Australia because solar is not really efficient yet, and those wind farms keep breaking down and need to be repaired. Now, if we really had a serious attempt to make these solar cells more efficient, I'm sure they could be, and there's a lot of solar around here in Hawaii. The wind power doesn't work out all that well. You can't store the power from when the wind is blowing hard to be used when the wind isn't blowing at all. The technology just isn't there yet. And I'm all in favor of augmenting the electric power with solar and wind. But the problem again with wind, besides the high breakdown rate, they put those windmills where they know the wind is going to be blowing. But that's also the paths birds will use to get from one place to the other without having to exert themselves so much. They'll ride the wind. And they fly into those wind farms and they get chopped to pieces. Okay. Yep, that's what they're saying. Just got an email. In other words, these scientists are saying that the new way to make ice cubes is to pour tap water into the frying pan of your stove. Absolutely. That's what they're saying. I think this is why they've de-emphasized science education in our public school system because they don't want people to have the education and knowledge to know when they're being lied to. So let's get on over to computers and security and Facebook because that is rapidly turning out to be a major disaster. Facebook could actually shut down from this. Their stock has tumbled again. The value has dropped by more than $50 billion. Fortunately, Mark Zuckerberg sold a big chunk of his stock before the decline, so he's preserved his wealth here. Apparently, Facebook had a data leak damage control session, but the company chiefs Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg didn't show up. Now, apparently, he's released a statement since then saying that Facebook wants to serve us all with security, blah, 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 blah. But it's a mess. So we're already talking about class action lawsuits. Now, if you are running a Microsoft Windows machine, there is a tool by which your machine can be worked on remotely. It's called the Remote Assistance feature. And if it is enabled, then a technician somewhere else can log into your machine and take it over. Now, personally, I turn it off, and I would advise you to do the same. But apparently, there's a new vulnerability that's been discovered in Windows Remote Assistance for versions 10, 8.1, and 7 that allows remote attackers to steal sensitive files on the targeted machines. Completely out there. AMD is now disclosing that they have found yet more flaws, meaning possible hardware backdoors in the processors. They're promising patches are coming soon. The patches, unfortunately, will slow down the processors so you're not getting the speed that you paid for. And again, there is so much out there that is being done by the nation states. In fact, Kaspersky apparently reported on the discovery of a new, very potent malware and inadvertently exposed an NSA security operation, which has now been shut down. The NSA is sending out malware to infect people's computers in the name of finding ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Okay, let's see. Alrighty, let's see. Expedia's Orbitz says that 880,000 payment cards have been compromised in a security breach. That is a lot of cards. Apparently, the incident actually took place between October 2016 and December 2017, exposing customers' information to hackers. Personal information, including name, address, date of birth, phone number, email address, and gender. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, we've often talked about DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, and apparently they have a parallel organization called the Intelligence Advanced Research Project Agency, and they are running a program called Finder. And basically, it's taking advantage of the fact that photos taken with smartphones, tablets, and quite a few of the consumer digital cameras have geolocation information saved with the image by default. It's saved in an area called the EXIF, and basically, if you've uploaded these photos to like the cloud or something, somebody can look at these photos, know immediately where they were taken, see who was in the photo. This is all being justified as another tool to basically track terrorist groups posting propaganda photos, which actually would make sense, which begs the question of why the people making these propaganda photos don't get a drone strike on them. Now, if you're concerned about privacy, you can turn off geolocation in your smartphone and tablet, or if you prefer, what you can do is Photoshop and many other of these paint boxes allow you to go on in and edit the EXIF information. And you can go on in there and delete the location if you're concerned about your privacy and where things are going. Okay, Robert F. Kennedy is finally starting to surface from his Vaccine Safety Commission. And actually, this is more from his World Mercury Project. And he's delivered vaccine safety details to Congress. And this was a report promised to Congress, providing details on a 6-step program to introduce sound science and transparency to our vaccination program for children. And the organization said that 15 like-minded advocates joined Kennedy on Capitol Hill to fulfill our promise to the community in providing data that they said would dramatically improve child vaccine safety. Obviously, a very good idea. Now, there was an effort to deal with vaccine safety once before. And of course, the industry lobbyists just go up to Congress and promise all kinds of money. But Kennedy's a voice to be reckoned with. And he's out there saying federally elected officials can no longer ignore the chronic health problems tied in no small part to adverse vaccine reactions that currently affect over half our nation's children. So hopefully Congress is going to listen, because it is a real problem. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting tired of living in a country where corporations are allowed to just sell any product, no matter how badly it harms people, just because it makes money. Now, over in the European Union, the European Commission has now approved Bayer's £46 billion takeover of Monsanto. So we're going to take the company that gave us GMO and the company that sold AIDS-tainted medicines around the world. They're now merging into one huge corporate monster. And there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. I need you to share what you have learned here and at whatreallyhappened.com with everybody that you know. Use email, personal contact. Obviously, we're being heavily filtered on the social media, the corporate social media rather, It's time to basically just flush them out of our lives. And there are several stories on how to delete yourself from Facebook, which I think people need to start doing. We'll be back here tomorrow. Aloha, America.